Okay, so for today we have Rick Jenner from ParkPlay. He's someone we have wanted to get for a while. We have loads of respect for ParkPlay or as an organization, has a really great mission. If you're in the UK, you might recognize the name ParkPlay, or you might think it sounds a bit like Park Run. Park Run is another great organization. Park Run, if you haven't heard of it, is this idea that you get people out once a week to run a 5K in one of their local parks. And it's a good force for activation, really galvanizing, but there are a lot of aspects of park run that might make it inappropriate for certain communities. It requires quite a few volunteers, and even though it's very inclusive, not every community is going to be filled with people who want to run a 5K or can run a 5K or find it aspirational to run a 5K. So it's a great organization, but there are some limitations in what communities it'll work in and how big the communities need to be in order to support one. Park Play sort of takes that idea of what if we got people outside moving, but instead of attaching it to a 5K run, we said, well, what if we just got people outside playing? And there's a great emphasis on multi-generational play, getting children, adults, grandparents out, getting them out into their local spaces, and just sort of empowering communities to get outside and have a nice time. Um, Park Play has just done a great job across the UK. They're trying to get started in Scotland, but right now, most of their communities are in England, and they've done a really great job of working within and with multiple communities. So it's not just an organization, that will work in middle class communities that have loads of resources. They've done a really great job of finding communities um, that might not always have other options for physical activity, um, or in communities where people might not necessarily have enough money to afford a gym membership, um, or have the money for the kit to do sports and organize sports and things like that. So it's a nice chat we have. We talk about lots of things. We talk about Rick's background, where he came from, and then we talk about the philosophy of Park Play, the challenges of trying to make an organization like Park Play work, and really just how we can get more people outside together. So it's a nice chat. Um, we do it in person today, and I think at the beginning there's some ambient noise, but I think we fix it later in the interview. So hope you enjoy it, and I'll come back in a few minutes.
How to stand on shifting sand. How to bend but stay intact.
Okay, today I'm here with Rick Jenner from ParkPlay, and Rick is someone that I've known for a while now. ParkPlay is an organization that I just have a lot of respect for, and when I first heard about it, it just seemed like such a great idea. Um, at ParkPlay, the clue is in the name. It sounds a bit like Park Run, but the idea is to get people, multi-generational groups, families, children, parents, older adults in together in a community place and just get them moving and playing and having fun. And I just think it's so important to have this emphasis on play and community building, especially. I think there's something about the power of play that can work in certain communities where maybe having a running based model or fitness based model isn't always useful. So I really wanted to get Rick on just to talk to him about what he's doing at Park Play and really just have a nice chat. So Rick, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Yeah, it's good to have you. We're lucky I actually have him in person today, so I don't even have to worry about internet connection. And I just wanted to get going, but first I just wanted to know a little bit about you, Rick. Sort of where you came from, what your background is in movement and things like that, or other professional backgrounds, and then how you got into Park Play.
Yeah, thank you. So my professional background originally was in kind of media and telecoms.
Mm-hmm.
So first 10, 12 years of my career, I worked at various organisations, including ITV, The Times, and then latterly Virgin Media. Kind of just fell into it from the university. But also, I've also been someone who's always been pretty active and sporty, and I reflected on this a lot recently because it all came from really being very fortunate to have an upbringing where I grew up in the countryside, my parents who were always very active, very keen for me to be involved in sport, and I also really enjoyed it. So I had the opportunity, and so I was always very active. We were always going on active holidays, we were always going on cycling holidays, hiking holidays. So it was just kind of second nature. And then when I had my daughter, who is now almost 12, so almost 12 years ago, or just I realized that I wanted to. My wife has always done the thing that she cared about, that she was passionate about in the art world, and I realized that I needed to make a change, and I wanted to, partly for the sake of my daughter and being a better example to her, I wanted to get involved in the thing that I really cared about, and I had actually really got into running in my kind of 20s and early 30s, and so I decided I wanted to get into I suppose what then was the sports industry. So I worked for myself for a little bit. And then I joined a sports marketing agency called Limelight Sports, which did mass participation events. But I'd always really wanted to do something which was going to have a positive impact on people, in particular on people's health. And I was lucky enough, in fact, almost exactly 5 years ago, I was celebrating being involved in ParkPlay for 5 years just the other day with my wife. Very fortunate, I met the people who are the founders of ParkPlay, who'd come up with this initial concept, and they were looking for somebody to lead it full time. And I put my hand up and said, I'd love to do that. So I quit the job that I was doing at the time and became involved in ParkPlay, and that was late 2019.
Great.
So ParkPlay is kind of 5 years old, and that's how I came into it. And actually, just very briefly on. I'm fortunate enough to have been very active and sporty since a young age, mainly because of my upbringing. And I really wanted to help people who weren't fortunate, who didn't have those opportunities that I had, to realise the huge benefits of being more active, and particularly being more active and healthy outdoors. So that's I suppose the link to ParkPlay.
So that's great. So I have an idea of where you're coming from now. Can you just talk a little bit more about what ParkPlay is? Can you talk about sort of the genesis of ParkPlay and I guess the mission of ParkPlay for people who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so the genesis of ParkPlay was that some of our founders had seen obviously how successful parkrun has been, and wanted to create more accessible opportunities for more people, particularly people who are less active or who don't have the opportunity to be more active, and to be used to do that in the fantastic parks and open spaces that we have in this country. So the idea was really quite a simple one in the beginning. A lot has happened since the genesis of that idea, and we have developed our charitable mission is to build happier, healthier communities nationwide through the power of play, through the life-changing power of play, I should say. And so to break that down a little bit, that is about having a positive impact on people's physical and mental health by bringing communities together and empowering communities to create their own free weekly opportunity for that community to come together and be more active outdoors through play, through fun, free, informal games and activities, which the community then put on every single week for the benefit of the people that live near them, for their friends, family, neighbours, other people in the community.
So why play? Why the emphasis on play as opposed to, I don't know, exercise or run? I guess running has already been taken, but why this emphasis on play specifically?
Well, I suppose there's two reasons for that. I mean, firstly, when we started, it was a better word than sport.
Yeah.
So for as many people that are sporty or find anything to do with sport attractive, and I count myself as one of those people, there are as many people who don't consider themselves to be sporty, perhaps didn't have those opportunities and don't have that background, and for all kinds of other reasons that wouldn't find sport appealing. So we wanted to find a word that was a better and friendlier descriptor. Play is a much better word, but also it actually accurately reflects so it actually describes what ParkPlay is, and that is a much more kind of fun and informal approach, a non-competitive approach to activity. So allowing people to come and take part in a much more informal environment to play a range of games and activities that the community decides they want to play and that are appropriate for that community and also the space that they're in. So for example, it could be that, and also the people that attend on any given day. So in some places that'll be an emphasis on things like scavenger hunts for kids, where you have that kind of environment where you've got places for people to kind of hide and explore. And in other places, it might just be kind of more adapted versions of sport that you can play in a park setting, but all done in a way that is inclusive and fun and social, most importantly, because, again, one of the other things that was at the genesis of ParkPlay was that we believe that anything that we do with any consistency and longevity has to be enjoyable.
Yes.
And it has to involve people that you like or love. So it has to be something social at the same time. So those two things have always been at the heart of ParkPlay: enjoyment and sociability. And if you can bring the community together and people can enjoy themselves, then actually that'll help people to be more active, be more healthy in the long term for the benefit of their physical and mental health.
Yeah, I think it's so important, because I just had a conversation with someone else today about this. Someone who's formerly at the fitness industry, and so much of the fitness industry is sort of based on languages like of willpower and enduring, and sort of this idea of like overcoming discomfort. And obviously that's appealing for a certain segment of the population. But for so many people, that is not what they're interested in. Just this idea, like, you said, something that has to be enjoyable with people you love, with your friends. I think it's so important to have that embedded in the community. And that's one of the things I really love about ParkPlay, is that there's this focus on the community. So there's a few words that you said that I want to sort of talk about. And actually, the first one I really want to bring up is this idea of inclusivity, because I think a lot of times people will have these narratives of like, oh, play isn't for me, or physical activity isn't for me. And I think we both know that one of the biggest barriers that people have is confidence, or maybe stories about what sort of activities they might engage in or might not engage in. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about this inclusivity generally. And then a follow-up question is, once you get people out and moving and you're playing these games and these adaptive sports, can you give me some examples of how you might make this inclusive for people so everyone feels like they can participate? So, having grandmothers play with their grandchildren, etc.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think that what we believe is that there is something for everybody. There is it's important that more people are active for all the benefits that come from that. But that, and what you described is that the kind of fitness industry and running and more formal sport is great for actually quite a large number of people. But there's a whole other kind of cohort of people who have been left behind, whom sport and physical activity, or the current, partly because of their attitude to it, which is something which obviously has come through their people's upbringing and experiences and so on, means that actually that doesn't appeal to people. That more kind of formal competitive side of particularly kind of side of sport. So we've tried to make ParkPlay as inclusive as possible. I mean, it won't be for everybody, but also I think we've realised also that what ParkPlay is doing is bringing communities together, and the more people that we can bring together, also the huge benefits that brings in terms of people's connection with other people, combating isolation, feeling more centered in a place that they and also taking kind of greater ownership of public spaces and open spaces as well. So hopefully ParkPlay appeals to, and we find it does appeal to quite a wide cross section of people. Because also it not only can it be adapted to meet kind of slightly different needs in different communities and different people, but it also appeals to a very kind of natural kind of instinct in people. I mean, I'm someone who's very competitive, actually quite competitive and does competitive sport, but I also know nothing better than just to muck around with my daughter or muck around with other people. And I get a huge sense of enjoyment from that, and seeing people's, the smile and the laughter on people's faces as people kind of, play and take part in the kind of the games and the activities that we have, both ones that we have designed, but also, and in some cases, borrowed from other places, but also that people make up themselves. So we really encourage people to change the rules and adapt and play the games that work for them. And just to answer your other question, to give you some examples of that, I'll give you a couple of examples because we have different kinds of games.
Yes.
But I'll give you a couple of ParkPlay classics, and they're not particularly original. I mean, a lot of this is actually quite.
I mean, the good stuff works. The classics are classics for a reason.
And I know one of them is actually quite similar to games that I know that you play at Wildstrong as well. So, so we play a game quite a lot, or quite often playing at the beginning because it's a super simple game.
Yeah.
Called Hungry Snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what people do, and this is a great game for everyone to play together. So in a space, it could be a circle, a triangle, whatever, a reasonably large space, you have two people holding a sash and they're the snake,
mm-hmm.
and they have to try and catch other people. And when they tag other people, those people then join the back of the snake, part of the snake, and the snake gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So at the end, ultimately, you might have 10, 12, even 15 people trying to catch two people who have managed to evade the snake. Super simple.
Yep.
You'll be surprised. Maybe you won't be surprised. How enjoyable. And how suddenly you see people laughing, and also you can adapt it slightly or change the rules, mm-hmm. so that if you have somebody maybe who's a young child who's particularly quick and nimble, and you've got some older adults who aren't, you can change the rules so it kind of levels the playing field a little bit, so that actually everybody can enjoy playing that game. And then we do play some kind of adapted versions of sports. Mm-hmm. So we have a great game which we can play called End Zone, which is basically a kind of a cross between netball and American football. Basically, you're just trying to pass the ball and work your way up a pitch to the end zone where you can score a point. Mm-hmm. And what's great is that although younger children, older children, adults, older adults will play it quite differently, and they have different skill levels in terms of catching and throwing a ball. What we quite often do at ParkPlay is then we will have some of those groups playing slightly separately, so they can all play the same game, but it'll be safe for them, and they'll also get something out of it. So young children might be running after each other like headless chickens, whereas the adults, the kind of younger or middle-aged adults, might be playing quite a competitive, quite enjoyable game. And the older adults might be just playing a slightly more skill-based, slower-paced game, and they might be playing it at a walking speed. So you can play games together, which you adapt, or you can break groups into smaller groups, so they can all get something out of it. So the children can enjoy it, the adults can enjoy it, and also older adults can enjoy it as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I did want to ask you about the logistics of it, because obviously, like, sometimes these groups are quite big. Like, what are some of the bigger groups that you have coming consistently? How many people are we talking about?
Well, I mean, it really varies, because in some communities, and I think particularly in communities where physical activity is not the norm, it's also not, and people lack confidence, and also, frankly, it's not their priority.
Yeah.
We always forget it's certainly something
very important to consider. Yes,
it really isn't.
Yeah, you think of the sort of the hierarchy of needs, and there's certain things you need to tick off before you feel like you can give yourself permission to play once a week.
Yeah, so in those places, actually, a dozen or 15 people coming together, it's brilliant. And it's a more intimate environment. We had ParkPlays. We had some very, very big ParkPlays, but we do quite often get ParkPlays that might be 50, 60, 80.
Yeah.
Just the weekend just gone, we had 100 people at a ParkPlay.
Yeah, wow.
And then you just you do some things together. You split into groups for other things. But also, what's brilliant is also ParkPlay really emphasizes the beginning and end. So there is a session, so to speak.
Yeah.
But also there's an informal beginning and end,
right,
where you encourage people to make those connections, to have conversations, to just enjoy being there as a community. And also, if somebody, let's say, for example, an older adult who maybe wants to participate in some of the early games and the warm-up kind of activities, but then we quite often have people who might just go for a walk. They might come back and serve tea and coffee to people. So it's a real community event where people can do things in a way that works for them.
Yeah.
No one is forced to be included or to play in a way that they don't feel comfortable with. And the games and the whole session is adapted to the people that are there. It's not a fixed entity. And it looks very different in different places. So ParkPlay in a small rural community in Yorkshire might look quite different to a ParkPlay with a large number of people in a more urban setting in London, for example.
Well, that's a good segue, because that's actually what I wanted to talk about next. Is you've talked about this community empowerment, and also you never want to feel like you're imposing something on people. Like, obviously, imposed fun is no fun at all. So how do you sort of create the kind of grassroots energy within the community? What does it look like? And, how do you kind of ensure that you have this community-centered approach to it?
Yeah, it's pretty funny you asked that because I just it just triggered a memory that when we started ParkPlay in Leeds. I remember somebody saying to me that Rick, this will be really successful here as long as you don't turn up again. And they meant that in the nicest possible way.
Yeah,
They basically meant, look, this is about us.
yeah, yeah,
This is about you empowering and
yeah.
letting us get on with it.
That's great. Yeah,
Because you're a kind of posh southerner.
yeah,
That won't go down well,
yeah,
which is absolutely fair, totally correct. Um, so, and I think we have to be really careful to kind of focus on doing what we do well. And we talk about doing two things, about igniting and guiding. And basically what that means is working with organizations, local authorities, whoever it be, to create the conditions to get ParkPlay started in places which would benefit from it, where there's demand for it, and create something which can be sustainable long term. And then to support those communities, but in a way where we are allowing them to create something which is going to work in their community at a time that works for them, playing games and activities that work for their community, where we can support them in that and provide them with a lot of the tools and support and confidence to do that in a safe and welcoming way. And it's not easy. We've started 82 ParkPlays now across the country, but and some of those are very successful. Because it's more challenging.
yeah,
It's always about the local people and finding brilliant local people who want to do something special for their community.
yep,
And giving them the skills and the tools to do that. And then and the ParkPlays that are really successful have those brilliant community minded people at the center of them who have the kind of trust of local people.
Yeah.
So who people want to go and spend their time with on a weekend. But our biggest challenge is finding people in the first place and making sure that every ParkPlay is owned and led and by that community, and it's not something that is imposed by us or the local authority. But we're really, finding some of those champions that want to do something brilliant.
How do you find those people? How do you find those champions, who can turn into play leaders? How do you go into a community and figure out who those people are and, get them to join in?
Well, so sometimes those people approach us directly. So
Right.
just to give you an example, we're starting a couple of new ParkPlays in the Southall area at the moment, or we're working on that. And because we've already had a few ParkPlays there, local people have found out about it and they've approached us and they've something they'd love to bring to slightly different parts of that community. So sometimes that is happening kind of organically. And then in other places where perhaps we've been approached directly by a local authority, that has come about through connection. So through ultimately using kind of networks to find those local people or organizations who might want to take this on and do something for their community. I have the kind of skills and attributes to do that. So again, to give you an example of that, we're starting ParkPlay in Surrey soon, and down there through community connectors that work in those places, they've been able to spread the word and identify and infuse and empower people who to see this as something that would be really good for them to get involved in for the benefit of their local communities and to champion. So that can take a little bit of time, but it's either through people kind of coming to us or trying to kind of go in the other direction to identify some of those people, particularly where ParkPlay hasn't started, and obviously the awareness of ParkPlay at the moment, we're still in the the early stages really. So the awareness is not particularly, certainly not like it is for Park Run. So that could take quite a long time, a lot of work. But we're kind of committed to making sure that we do that in the right way, so that we're laying down strong foundations for the long term.
So obviously what we do at Wild Strong is, is slightly different the way that our setup is, but it's one of the things we always think about when people approach us. They say, I'd like to start a Wild Strong, or, also a Nature Moves, depending on the context. And they always ask us, well, what do we need for this to be successful? So we say, well, it's nice to have a space that feels like it's your own, a place that feels like a safe space. You can see it change through the seasons, a place where, the community can gather. And they always say, well, what does it take to be a successful Wild Strong coach? And I always say, well, it's not about being the best at exercising. It's sort of about, having that empathy and that emotional intelligence, to sort of bring people together. What kind of characteristics or attributes have you found make really successful play leaders? Do you feel like you have a sense, like when you're first helping to start up a ParkPlay? Do you feel like you have a sense of what you're looking for? Like, how do you kind of get that feeling like, oh, this person will be perfect for this?
Yeah, and it's quite hard because sometimes it's quite kind of intangible.
Yes.
I mean, it tends to be. There's something about it's definitely kind of personal kind of characteristic, traits. It's definitely a kind of warmth of personality. It's a passion for people and community.
Hmm.
Because people who lead ParkPlay, which we call play leaders, they're not coaching anything.
Hmm.
What they're doing is really just creating an environment where people, particularly people who may be less active, people who wouldn't necessarily or wouldn't have the opportunity to take part in physical activity in other forms, will want to come there. So it has to be somebody who, or people, I should say as well, because we have teams of people who people, I think trust is a really important word.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily in the sense of necessarily knowing that person personally already, but knowing that that is somebody who they can, that's going to empathize with them, and it's going to, it's going to somebody they feel comfortable with. So it's quite often people who are a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more confident, perhaps, or we can help to give some confidence to. And we've got so many examples, and as a kind of general rule, that tends to take us to people who are maybe a little bit older, just a little bit more mature, a bit more kind of grounded in a place.
Yep.
And also lots of the best play leaders are women as well.
Interesting.
And I think that's, again, how the way people feel about other people and the way they feel about their community. And also, a lot of the people that come to ParkPlay also are women and girls. So we're really proud of the fact that 60% of people that come to ParkPlay are females. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some absolutely brilliant people involved in ParkPlay, and I could give you 101 different examples. But perhaps just to touch on one, we got a fantastic play leader down in Cornwall called Karen, a place called Treverben. Yeah, and she's just a lovely. She's a she's a mum. She's just a lovely, warm, caring person who a lot of people locally like.
Yeah.
So when the event started, I think people wanted to come to it largely because of her, because it was something that they thought would be fun and beneficial for them and their community, but also because of her and because of her warmth and personality. And I think also now being part of ParkPlay, and hopefully the support we've given her, but also now the experience that she's developed, that's given her a lot more confidence as a person as well. And she's doing something really, really good and fun and special for her community every week. And I think there are lots of examples of that with people with similar personalities and warmth and ability to connect with a whole range of people, particularly adults. Actually, it's really important that people can connect with those adults, because generally children tend to be a little bit, particularly younger children actually tend to be a bit quicker to kind of get involved and throw themselves in.
Yeah, they have fewer barriers, I think.
Particularly if they are used to playing.
Yes.
Again, not all children are necessarily, and we could probably talk a lot about the amount of time children spend on devices and not being very particularly social. But I think it does tend to be adults who have more hang-ups about and partly because they've had quite often will have had poor experiences of being physically active.
I think everyone has that horror story of PE being the last one picked or being embarrassed, in a school event or something like that. There's a lot of baggage in this idea of physical activity.
That's why we try and not do things like pick teams.
Yes, yeah. Well, actually, that's probably a good. That wasn't the question I was going to ask, but how do you arrange teams? How do you arrange the groups and things like that when you make it? Is it something that, does it just emerge out, or do you do like certain games? How do you arrange it if you're going to have something where there's a team-based activity? How do you make it happen?
I mean, there's a kind of few different ways you can do it. I mean, the way that I quite often do it, and we advise people to, is either literally split groups into 2 or 3.
Yes.
And it's literally like the ones on my left and the ones.
I do the same thing. I just chunk them out. You over here, you over here.
Or you make a joke of it and say, we're going to play a game with the little ones over there and with the big ones.
Yeah.
Or the young ones and the old ones.
Yeah.
But it's never on the basis of skill.
No.
Or trying to choose people who.
No, we try to. So sometimes we'll make our groups based on enthusiasm. So I found that people there's not too much ego in that. So sometimes we'll kind of have like an imaginary line and say, if you really, 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 really want to win, go stand over here. If you don't really care about winning, stand over here. If you're somewhere in the middle, and it's actually, people are quite good at self-identifying based on your enthusiasm to be competitive. So we'll put all the competitive people together and the less competitive people together, and that works out quite well. It's interesting what you said about the gender breakdown because we found the same thing. And not to get too essentialist about gender, but I do think that for whatever reason, women often tend to be the connectors in the communities, and that's obviously not always the case. We can think of, examples that contradict that. But we found the same thing that women often tend to be the connectors. And also for us with the Wild Strong groups, often when the group starts, the vast majority of the group will be women. And then what we find over time is that the men sort of come maybe first semi-reluctantly, they've been pulled in by a wife or something like that. And then after a year or two, we found that the breakdown on genders, while still probably always at least 60% women, it kind of evens out a little bit. Have you found that changes over time as a park play community matures? Does the population tend to shift, or do you always sort of have that same sort of ratio of men to women?
I don't think it's perhaps changing quite the same way. I mean, it's definitely it's different from place to place,
Yes.
and there's definitely various kind of cultural factors there as well. Um, essentially, what you say, I think women are probably a bit more sociable as well.
Yes.
I think particularly, and there is also a what slightly kind of different but kind of related kind of issue with how sociable some men are as they get older. Women tend to be better at connecting and other those social connectors. Men can tend to get, which actually in itself would lend. We would like to get more men involved, particularly men who are parents who, as they get older, need to stay connected with other people and with their friends and their members. And I think there's also something about. I think men sometimes take themselves a bit too seriously.
Yes. Yeah.
And aren't quite as prepared to be silly.
Yeah.
And muck around.
Yep.
And and it's kind of always like, well, if I'm going to play sports, I'm going to do it seriously.
Yeah.
And
there's a certain comfort, I think, in just focusing on the competition. I think a lot of reasons people do like sports is because they're so constrained and the rules are very set. You think about social interaction. Social interaction without rules can be quite challenging. So, I think we're up in Scotland right now, and Scottish country dancing is still a thing. And I'm terrible at dancing, and I don't like dancing because I have trouble letting go and things like that. But I find the Scottish country dancing a little bit easier because you have the set rules. It's essentially a computer program. Like, I know I turn here, I do this, I count the beats, and I end up over here, which is much less terrifying for me than like being a dance floor and saying, well, just move with the music. And one of the best things about moving to the UK is actually everyone tends to be much more awkward over here. So I'm often not always the worst dancer in the room. But it is funny. I think the sports, because they kind of codify the behavior, what your position is, what you're supposed to do. And I think that's a very good point. Sometimes it's harder to open up with a more a free play. But yeah, it's one of the things we've noticed as well. And I see it in myself. Even though I'm in a social position and I'm often going out and meeting people, as I get older, I find that like I really see the draw of just like hanging out in a shed by myself. You know what I mean? And it's really funny trying to fight that natural, maybe not natural, but whatever that trajectory is. And I've been thinking about that a lot as well. Is how do you create a sort of space for everybody, but like also, I almost feel like sometimes if we make a space for women and children, the men will sometimes filter themselves out just because they see it as being silly or frivolous or something. That's a big challenge. Is that something you've actively tried to address? Like, are there any communities where you found that for whatever reason you do have a larger participation from men? And is that something conscious, or that's just how the community works out?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't think we have, but also we haven't really consciously.
Yeah,
we're probably not at the stage yet where we're really more consciously trying to address some of the kind of issues like that.
Yeah.
And frankly, the same goes for other specific groups. Like we have thought a bit about how we might be better for disabled people. There are some inherent challenges, obviously, with something that is happening outdoors in some cases on a field.
Yeah.
Sometimes placed with no facilities. We haven't really yet actively tried to make sure that ParkPlay is in areas which would make sure that there is a kind of strong representation of ethnic minorities, for instance.
Yes.
That's not to say that actually ParkPlay is in lots of places. So ParkPlay is in lots of places where we do get a very diverse range of people attending. But I think as we continue to grow, it'll probably be something we put more
Yeah.
attention on. But at the moment, we're kind of still growing quite kind of organically and going where people are interested and where communities or local authorities would like ParkPlay to start. So we're not being, so we're trying to make sure ParkPlay is in places where there are greater levels of health inequality, less opportunity, but not necessarily kind of overlaying that with other kind of needs and requirements.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges? I guess some of the challenge. I'm sure there's some challenges you expected, but what are some of the challenges that have really surprised you, or some challenges you hadn't considered over the last 5 years since you've been doing this for a while now? What are some kind of challenges that have emerged with ParkPlay and trying to start a new community or to continue a community? And how have you kind of addressed those, or have you found any solutions or, I guess, tips or advice for other people running communities?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has changed over the last few years, and I think what we discovered is that this idea that we had at the beginning, we put it out into the world, and then you have to see how it's kind of adopted, and then we've made lots of changes. Particularly, actually, we've talked about this already a little bit, but particularly who is how we find good, strong leaders and how then ParkPlay is kind of embedded in those communities. That's changed quite considerably since we started. The other thing that, and this is a more recent kind of phenomenon, we all kind of assumed, perhaps a little bit naively, that if you bring something to a community and it's free, that lots of people would come. And obviously the reality for lots of people is, and we've kind of already touched on this already, but that this is not that, physical activity is not if a lot of people is not their priority. And there are still lots of reasons why, even if you're breaking down the barriers to things like cost and, this isn't formal, this is much more kind of informal activity, this is a community event. Even then, for a lot of people, there still remain lots of barriers to people attending. And so, we've had sometimes particularly actually in the last year, we've started some ParkPlays which have had really quite significant numbers of people at the first few events, and then those numbers have tailed off for lots of reasons. Sometimes actually, maybe the day or the time wasn't brilliant for lots of people on a regular basis. Or another reason that some people don't necessarily attend very regularly is again, we've assumed that once they've been once or twice, they know it's happening. There are lots of people who don't live necessarily very organised or very predictable lives. People's lives are more more unpredictable, and particularly if you've got children, then there's lots of so you need to keep persevering and reminding people that something is happening and it's free and it's on their doorstep, and tell them what it is. Again, I think we keep trying to reminding ourselves to not fall into the trap of making assumptions about that something is going to be appealing to people, that they understand what it is. You've got to kind of keep going back and keep reinforcing what it's about. And then we've tried to do things that we can do to help empower the local people to overcome some of these issues and to help people to come back regularly. But also we're doing some stuff ourselves. So, for example, we are making sure that we're recognising and rewarding people who do come back more regularly and giving people reasons to keep coming back. Because as I said, like it's fine probably for people who are more active and who for whom physical activity is a kind of a given. But if it's not, and you're trying to reach those communities, then you need to keep persevering to show them and to help not only make sure they have a fantastic experience and they want to come back, but actually giving them those reasons and those little nudges to kind of keep persevering with something. Because again, for some people, it will be a little bit more difficult, a bit more challenging, because there are all kinds of reasons why people are not, don't see activity as something which is for them or as a priority. So lots of, huge. We're learning the whole time, and there's probably more we could be doing to understand people and people's behaviour, but also be sharing that more widely with other people. Because this is one of the big challenges of our age. We are increasingly have a population, not only in the UK, but in certainly lots of more developed countries, and an aging population that is spending a large proportion of their later years with multiple health conditions, which leads not only to a poorer quality of life for those individuals, but the huge strains and stresses on on health and social care. And physical activity is such an important component of long-term health.
Yes.
And so we've got to keep persevering and changing not only the opportunity, but also the culture within a country to help people to lead more active lives in whatever way works for them, to fundamentally address, as I said, this challenge that we have, which will only get worse if we don't try and do more to address it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex issue, and I think there's so many different groups who are trying to address this, because we do just realize that, just having a gym in your town or village obviously isn't going to fix it. While it is something that's great for a lot of people, it's obviously something we have to hit from multiple angles. Imagine you had unlimited resources. Imagine I've just given you 100 billion pounds, and I've given you the remit, just to focus on the UK and to really try to fix this problem. So obviously, I think some sort of multi-generational play outlet and opportunity like ParkPlay is really important. What else would you do if you had unlimited resources, and you were really trying to increase the physical activity level, address, isolation, social loneliness? What are some other things that you would try to get people doing?
Well, I think there are three big kind of components to this. There's the environment. Actually, the particularly the urban environment is not one that naturally encourages and promotes physical activity and play. And we see that in the fact that a generation ago, and in my generation, I would have been playing out the whole time, playing in the garden, playing in the street. So there's the built environment, particularly, is one that we need to fundamentally change, so that it becomes a space that can be reclaimed by people, not only for physical activity, but just for use by the community. And protecting the incredibly important communal spaces, parks and open spaces that should be the perfect places for people, particularly people who don't have gardens and so on and so forth. Actually, ParkPlay started on the playing field of a local store. So there's stores now trying to open up their facilities for more community. So I think the first thing is the environment. The second thing is more opportunities. And this is why I feel really encouraged by the conversations that I have with people like yourselves and people like Park Run and Beat the Street, all kinds of people who are trying to create different free opportunities for people to be active. So we just need more and varied, inclusive, enjoyable opportunities for more people to be active, because no one thing is the solution. But if there are more opportunities for people, then that is another kind of big part of the jigsaw. And then the final thing is then the kind of wider kind of cultural change. And I think that's we have made some progress on that. And I know that this girl can is a good example of a relatively large scale campaign which has started to shift attitudes and people's opinions towards physical activity, and started to really empower people to go and find those opportunities. But obviously, if those opportunities don't exist, then we just kind of create a little bit more demand that can never be realized. So I think it has to be all of those three things, and it probably will ultimately take significant investment. But actually, that investment is a drop in the ocean compared to the money that is spent on health and social care. A large proportion of which is a result, as I said, of an aging population that are unfortunately can be spending, in some parts of the country, can be spending as many as 15 to 20 years of latter life with health conditions that severely limit people's lives and impact their quality of life.
Yeah, that's a really complex issue, and we know, like all these multifactorial issues, play does tick so many boxes, because you get people outside, you get the physical activity, helps with the social isolation, which is one of the reasons why we use play as such a leading selling point for what we do as well, because it just naturally fixes a lot of this. You touched on this in the previous question, but it's one of the questions I always like to ask towards the end anyway, so I'm going to re-ask it from a different angle, even though I think you've answered it very well. What are you optimistic about? Because I think right now there's a general sense of pessimism, not in just in the UK, but also in the States. I think that people are starting to feel elements of, I don't know if fatigue is the right word, but I think if you talk to people, I think people are sort of worried about things. It's always nice to know what people are optimistic about, what they're excited about. What are some other positive trends you've seen in the last few years, or what are you looking forward to? What do you think is sort of like a, I don't know, a light at I don't know, a guiding light that kind of gives you hope?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I quite often feel, can feel, pessimistic like a lot of other people. I
Yeah.
think that what always lifts my spirit and makes me feel hopeful, and this can sound really kind of cliche, is other people.
Yeah.
And actually, when people are given opportunity and um, agency to
Mhm.
do good things, they can be amazing and can do things that have a kind of ripple effect in their
Yes.
communities. So I love meeting people who have obviously I meet a lot of people through ParkPlay. I
Mhm.
meet some wonderful, positive people that seem, despite everything, to be able to kind of have such a positive
Yeah.
outlook on life and to be able to kind of inspire other people.
Yeah.
Um, and then, and even just for example, the weekend, obviously we had just the weekend just gone, we had a storm that hit much of the country. It's
Yes.
so interesting to see how so many people responded so brilliantly to that, because there were people who, despite the fact that, in some places Parkland had to be cancelled because of
Mhm.
poor and dangerous weather. Dangerous weather actually, because we don't cancel when the weather's not bad.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Same with us. Yeah.
but what they were doing is they were just adapting and still making sure that they were there, raising the ParkPlay flag and bringing their communities together. So we still had events where we had an event in Essex which had over 100 people on a pretty miserable day,
Yeah.
coming together because they want to be around other people and they want that human connection. We had ParkPlay up in County Durham, Easington Colliery ParkPlay, had a load of people come to celebrate the third birthday of that event with
Wow.
Kay, the play leader.
Yeah.
And the photos are amazing. There's snow and ice.
Great. Yeah.
People are still coming out because they wanted to do that and celebrate. And thank Kay, the play leader, who's been doing an amazing job over the last 3 years. And then another ParkPlay in Stockton on Tees. Despite the fact that not many people came out, and recently started that ParkPlay,
Mhm.
the play leaders went around to people and took uh, food and warm drinks to their
Yeah.
community.
That's so
She
important.
went to the
Yeah.
community to make sure that they were okay and to say hello to people and to, which is just kind of so kind of heartwarming that spirit in
It's,
people
I
is
mean,
alive and well.
people really are good. And I think that's one of the things that we forget. I think if you look over and over again how people behave in, in times of crisis, I think you always see it brings out the best in people. I know like writers like Rebecca Solnit have written about this as well, but time and time again, you see that after natural disasters and things like that, I think it is people's natural inclination to go and help people. And I do think that, park play, like what you just said, is such a good example. Once you start making these cross connections in a community, you see how it can sort of help with local resiliency and mutual aid and things like that. And you just see that people will naturally start sharing and seeing the needs of people. And it's a shame that for whatever structural reasons that exist right now, people feel so atomized. And it's amazing once you just get people out face to face, they just start helping each other. It's really amazing. And I think being in this space, it's one thing that Jill and I have commented on all the time, from same with you being in the past, working in the private sector, which is lots of great people in the private sector as well. But once you start working in this sort of social, physical activity, you just meet wonderful people. I mean, you really, really do. You see people are trying so hard. And I think that's really important. A lot of our audience members are not in the UK. A lot of them will be in the US, and other places around the world. And I think they'll be listening to this and they'll think, this sounds great, okay, but right now. There's not an opportunity for them to engage with the park play, okay. So imagine you're a mother listening in Wisconsin. Just thinking about that because I've spoken to a lot of mothers in Wisconsin over the last few weeks for whatever reason, and they say, "This sounds great. What can I do? How can I get started? How can I bring people together?" Do you have any advice for people if they just want to start making these community connections, want to start playing physical activity? Where can they start?
Yeah, I mean, I think long term we will probably look to take part playing outside of the UK.
Mhm.
We're very focused on the UK at the moment because we're still pretty young.
Yeah, yeah,
We know run before we can walk.
right.
Sorry, walk before we can run even.
Gotcha. Yeah,
but I'd still be interested to hear from anybody who who thinks this is something they would like to bring to their community, and you never know when we might be able to do that. We're also very focused on bringing ParkPlay to Scotland and other
Yeah, yeah.
the UK. But I think also, what I would say as well is that, I mean, ultimately our vision actually is just, our vision is not about necessarily about establishing loads of events around the country. It's actually, it's simply about encouraging more people to play, particularly to play outdoors. And by that I mean, and for all the benefits that brings, the physical and mental health benefits, the community benefits, the combating isolation. So if people want to do that, then I would encourage them to do it just on a more informal basis.
Yeah.
Why not just encourage? Why not do that with start with your own family? Make sure that you are doing that with your own children, playing. It's difficult. It's increasingly, this is something which is some people are finding, some parents are finding more challenging.
Yeah.
Again, for all kinds of reasons.
Yes.
Like connect with your own family, with your own children. Do go out, and by play, we just mean be outside.
Yeah.
Being a little bit more active in, and all the kind of the range of kind of games, and that could be as simple as taking a ball and having a kick around in the park. It could be going into the garden and encouraging the kids to climb the tree.
Yeah.
Safely.
Yeah.
No, climb the tree.
Climb the tree. Climb the tree. Yeah. Climb the tree.
I used to
We're fine.
with my brothers.
I was gonna say, we all made it.
So I think start there, but also then are there things then you could do with your neighbours and friends? Could you do something on a semi kind of regular informal basis with people that are close to you? It doesn't have to be a kind of the only reason actually really that ParkPlay is a slightly more formal event, and actually we're trying to find that balance between, so that ParkPlay has only just enough structure,
yes,
to make sure it's kind of safe and welcoming. It doesn't kind of crush because so much sport becomes so structured, so rules based,
yes,
it kind of crushes the fun out of
yes,
thing.
yeah.
But we only feel we have to do that is because then actually gives people a real reason to come and be there on a regular basis, and also in some cases then local authorities require certain things if you're going to use the space and stuff regularly. But just go out and play, use those spaces, encourage other people, even in a park. Just quite often you'll see games kind of happening, and invite other people to come and play.
Yeah,
set out some jumpers for goalposts.
Yeah,
and play.
And encourage goalposts. That's right. Yeah,
and before you know it, you'll be making connections and friendships and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and people want to. That's the thing, is that people do want to play. It's just like you said. It's about giving people opportunities and giving people the confidence so they can give themselves permission to have fun. I think that's so important. All right, I think that's a good place to end. So Rick, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It'd be nice to get you back on in a few months and catch up with some other things.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so that was my chat with Rick Jenner from ParkPlay. Hope you enjoyed it. We've included some links to the organization in the show notes, and they do have a good map that shows where they're located. So if you're interested in coming out and getting involved, I'm sure they'd absolutely love that. And if you have any questions, they've got a great team, and I'm sure they'd be very happy to talk to you if you have any inquiries. All right, take care.